Despite an amazing and jaw-dropping season, college football has a very dark cloud following it. This cloud is called money and greed and the want for more. This is an energy that every professional sports league, especially in America, has dealt with at least once in its illustrious history, if not multiple times. Looking UMLB. But all of a sudden, this bad energy and aura has started to infect the kids' game, the students' game. And why is that? The 2024-25 college football season wrapped up about a week ago at this point, and Ohio State ran the table and proved all the haters wrong after a terribly embarrassing loss to Michigan at home. They turned that into an absolute beatdown of everybody in their path on their way to win their second national championship in a decade. The only problem is there is a lot of discussion and discourse discrediting their national championship because of some potentially legal but unethical ways that they achieved this feat. The problem is, when you look into it, they're not alone. And this is the scary reality we live in with the sport we love. And today I'm going to try my best to research and walk this issue down and see what possible fixes there are, how we even got here to this point. Welcome to a new series on this channel. This is State of the League, College Football 2024 Season Debriefing.
If you haven't any coal in the stove and you freeze in the winter and you curse to the wind at your face, when you haven't any shoes on your feet and you're coached in a paper and you look 30 pounds underweight, when you go to get a word of advice from the fat little pastor, he will tell you to love evermore. But when hunger comes around, rat-a-tat, at the window. Who's there?
Alright, this is my second attempt at recording this video. I have had a good night's sleep, I've meditated on some K-Dot tracks, and I've had enough caffeine to unalive an elephant. Because the first attempt I made at recording this video was very depressing, and even though this is a very serious subject, we still run a YouTube page here. Not a funeral home. To begin talking about why college football is in the state it's in, we have to go back. First, we have to know how we got here. And the way we really got here started about a decade ago. The year is 2013/2014. The BCS has completely lost any credibility it once had. The NCAA football games and basketball games are being discontinued because players aren't getting paid, or they are getting paid just under the table. There's no rules for that yet. And we now have this universe with a 4-team playoff. Now, the goal of the 4-team playoff was to create a more legitimate system of crowning a national champion in college football, which college football, for its entire existence, at least at the top level, Division I Single A, or as we now know it as Division I FBS, has always had issues crowning their national champion. Back in the day, you had the AP poll that decided the national championship. Then they decided to try both the Bowl Coalition and the Bowl Alliance, which the Rose Bowl was part of neither, so that didn't work. And then you got the BCS, and everyone hated the BCS because only 2 teams got opportunities at a time where in college football there was a lot of parity, there was a lot of undefeated teams and upsets, and there was this trend known as Bowl Busters, teams like Boise and Utah before they joined the power conferences, just coming in and rolling over teams like Oklahoma and Alabama. And they weren't getting a chance to compete for the championship. The computer was also very biased, and it sometimes didn't make sense why it ranked things the way they did. And there were like 27 different versions of the computer model because they kept messing it up. So they're like, okay, we'll just change some stuff. Well, they change it and it would suck just as bad. So they're like, all right, we're done with the BCS. It's time the sport has an actual playoff. So in 2014, they introduced the 4-team playoff. And for the last decade, it has created a power struggle, basically because only 4 teams can get into the playoffs in this era. It basically created a rich get richer situation where only certain top teams, only certain blue bloods got all the players. And not only that, but teams who were in the middle to lower range, who weren't necessarily bad teams, but they were good teams, just kind of started slowly falling until they just rock bottomed out, because you couldn't get recruits, because all the good recruits went to the same 6-ish teams that were yearly playoff contenders because they wanted to win championships. There was no NIL, there was no paying players. These players or teams, I'm calling players, let's move on to another subject, were usually Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Georgia, and that was it. Now, you had your usual fourth team in Cinderellas, the best example of this being 2019 LSU with Joe Burrow. But outside of that, the Cincinnatis, the one Washington appearance, the one Oregon appearance, the one Florida State appearance, these appearances all resulted in these underdogs that came in who weren't supposed to be a playoff team coming in and getting absolutely boat raced in either the first round, or if they made it to the championship, they got boat raced in the championship. See 2022 TCU. And every team that was struggling to compete knew it was time for change. So a lot of teams and a lot of states began going to the NCAA to request change. These changes involved expanded playoffs, name, image, and likeness, or NIL as you know it now, the transfer portal to have better rules for transferring players. The NCAA originally didn't want to budge, so around the time the pandemic happened, a bunch of teams took the NCAA to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the NCAA has no power in saying, no, players can't get paid for name, image, and likeness. Or they cannot keep the players from transferring. And this is where our story begins. The portal is really where this all begins, because the original rules of the portal, way back in the day before NIL got involved, as we'll discuss later, the portal almost never got used, because one rule that the NCAA had implemented was if you transferred to another school, you would then have to sit out a full season before you could compete. This really kept players from transferring, because say you transfer after your freshman year because you're not getting playing time, well then you're not going to play until your junior year, and at that point are NFL prospects even looking at you if you don't have seasons and experience and film to see you, unless you're Joe Milton or some gift from the gods quarterback who has no football IQ that a team's going to reach on. So a lot of players wouldn't transfer, mainly because there was no money involved, and they wanted to protect their education if they couldn't get seen in the college football world and couldn't go pro, which let's be real here, especially for our old heads, was it ever really about education when it came to college football?
Looks like you can play in the bowl game after all.
I just have to get A+ on my English lit final first. But I ain't worried, because I know the hell out of the very hungry caterpillar.
This all changed, though, starting in 2018, because in 2018, in the fall, the NCAA stopped requiring the contact to permission process. I think that's what it's called as I'm commentating. I'll get the link on the screen somewhere, or the article. All of these articles I'll link in the description too if you want to read yourself. Which meant players no longer have to ask permission to hit the transfer portal from their teams. This further got expanded as post-pandemic, about the same time the NIL controversy started popping up, they stopped making players sit out for a year. Now, this didn't become an official rule, surprisingly, until May of this past year, of 2024, which is weird, because it felt like for the last 3 years they weren't even enforcing the sit out a year rule anyway, except for a few players here and there, which allowed players to kind of just jump in wherever they want. And there's right now, three major transfer periods, which is like at the start of bowl season, at the end of bowl season, and then it happens again in April of this year. And we're already starting to see some pretty big problems with that, it seems. Two big issues. First of all, because of those early transfer portal periods, a lot of players get especially lesser teams, either smaller teams or teams that are really in the gutter and trying to dig deep to find an answer for next season, will be going to get a lot of big-time players in the very first transfer portal period. One of these examples this year was the backup quarterback for Penn State, Bo Pribula. I think that's how you pronounce it. He had to leave the team days before the team was set to open up at home at Penn State for the college football playoff. And a lot of these players are being put in these impossible situations where maybe the team has a bowl bid, or even better, a playoff bid. Maybe they're one of the top 4 teams that now get a automatic bye in the playoffs, but they are given the impossible decision, because if they wait to play for their team, especially if they're like a backup or a depth player, they're going to lose out on the potential to start somewhere and make a name for themselves. But they make that jump, they make that transfer at the risk of letting the team they're currently on down. And that's just a very bad situation to put college players in. I mean, you can't blame them. They all want to be successful in football. Why would they take Division I offers to even begin with? They all want to make it to the professional level. You can't fault a kid for wanting that, and it's really the NCAA's fault, and the lack of leadership and the lack of control by the NCAA forcing college players who want to make it to the NFL as their end goal to make really tough transfer decisions. Marshall is half this issue, and half other issue, which we're going to talk about later in this video, is that there is just mass exodus of players who transfer, especially when a coach gets fired. Is so many players left, or also so many players opted out of the bowl. We'll get into that in a minute, like I said. Marshall had to leave their bowl game. Marshall could not play their bowl game because they did not have enough players to field a competitive team. This is bad for the sport. Bowl games are already in a rough place. As I said, we'll get into that in a minute. But this is such a death blow, not only for bowl games, but for the transfer portal, because no team, especially a team like Marshall, even though they're not a power conference team, we are Marshall, the McConaughey movie. They're a prominent figure and personality in the sport. They shouldn't be forced to leave their bowl game because they don't have enough players. That is an insane scenario. It's never happened before. But if the transfer portal is not corrected and corralled in, this is something that may start out with Marshall this year, but who says, Mississippi State's in a tough place right now. Who says in a couple of years Mississippi State can't field a competitive team even though they're bowl eligible and they have to quit their bowl game? You want to talk about the embarrassment? You want to talk about losing TV revenue? This is something that needs to be fixed. And a lot of people have already started proposing fixes, which I agree with. Slightly. The big thing is everyone is saying we need one transfer period, and that one transfer period needs to be after the national championship game. I say, to be fair, because the part of this nobody realizes, once again, what's education and why do we need it, is players will then lose out on getting to their new schools for the spring semester. They'll also miss out on being there for spring training if you put the transfer portal that late into the game. I mean, if you want to play college football in the middle of the August heat, Godspeed. Everybody's calf muscles will be falling off the bone at that point, but sure, do it. Go ahead, guys. I say transfer portal January 1st, New Year's Day. Most of the bowl games, if not all of them, are all wrapped up at that point outside of the college football playoff games, which are like, a dime a dozen, because at that point there's only really 3 more games. There's the semifinal and the national championship as the schedule stands right now. So open it up on New Year's Day, about 14 to 16 days to transfer, and that is it. Another rule I would like to propose, which I haven't seen anyone propose yet, is you get one freebie transfer. That is it. Unless your coach is fired or leaves. After that, once you move to that team, you're locked there. You get one chance to redeem yourself. That is it. You are locked there. So the transfer portal needs a lot of fixing. But before we can really begin working on the transfer portal, we got to add another stack to the pyramid.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar. Ching, ching, bling, bling. Cut the chatter. You ain't talking money.
Oh, NIL, 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 nil. Yeah, so if you've been living under a rock in the college football world since 2019, NIL stands for name, image, and likeness, which means players can get paid for video games, for sponsorships and endorsement deals, and doing things like charity work, blah, 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 blah. Which means the good old-fashioned way of paying players is, slipping some McDonald's bags under the table, or players magically getting these brand new fully loaded Dodge Chargers. It's a way of the past, or you think. Remember that Supreme Court case I told you about at the beginning of the video? Yeah, so this is what that Supreme Court case was about. And the Supreme Court ruled that name, image, and likeness was okay. But now, because the NCAA, in all their powerlessness or cowardice, no one really knows, has failed to put any regulation, any caps, any laws in place to prevent chaos from happening involving NIL. So now there's two major issues with NIL. One of those being mystery NIL money. So remember when I said the ways of paying players under the table isn't a thing anymore? Yeah, so basically mystery NIL money is rich donors adding to the NIL collective of each team. So if you have $1 billion and your football team sucks, just throw your life savings into the NIL fund and it'll all be okay. Because when NIL first started, and it was a thing that was going to happen, 2021, early 2022, before the season even began, there was a lot of, $50,000 or $100,000 seemed absolutely insane for NIL. Today is different, and it's happened that fast. So you remember those pictures I put up on the screen during the video intro that'll get me taken down because I put a copyrighted song in it? That's a lot of the numbers now. Arch Manning, the biggest example, he's a Manning. He's football royalty. Of course he's going to get the highest NIL amount. That man is old enough to vote, or just became old enough to vote. I'm 3 years older than him, at least. That man makes more money with NIL than I probably will in my entire life. What? And there's a really sad part to this, too. You see the Arch Mannings and the Carson Becks and the Jeremiah Smiths get all of this money. What about other players on the team? What about kickers? What about offensive linemen? What about defensive linemen? What about linebackers? Are they getting $4 million in NIL? Odds are they're probably lucky to get $100,000 in NIL. Think about other sports too. Now, for example, a place like the University of Tennessee, I don't know. Yeah, mediocrity forever, baby. They like to parcel out their NIL amongst 4 sports. Some schools don't do that. Some schools just focus on football. So while football's getting millions and millions of dollars, which makes sense to a degree because it's the moneymaker, other sports that could benefit from more NIL funding are left in the dirt because it doesn't make money. Or, offensive linemen don't make money, but quarterbacks do. So quarterbacks are going to get filthy rich while offensive linemen have the same issues they've always had. Hey, here's $500 and a copy of the game to be an NCAA 25. Thanks, buddy. Issue 2 comes with a new thing. Well, it's not a new thing, but it's being newly reported. NIL tampering. So we talked about the transfer portal a minute ago, had a 7-minute yap session about it. Well, basically what is happening is weeks to months before the transfer portal opens, other teams are talking to other teams' players, offering them numbers in the millions for NIL, which may not even be real numbers, to come play for their school. So the second the transfer portal opens, it's not a, oh, I'm entering the portal to see what I get. Oh, I'm entering the portal, I may come back. Or I'm thinking about entering the portal. It is, I'm going to a new team today. My bags are already packed. I'm going to Cali, baby. And this goes back again to transfer portal. Remember that thing I told you about? The permission to contact thing that they got rid of in 2018? Well, yeah, this is kind of what happens when you get rid of that, is teams don't need permission from their players, don't need permission from their current teams to hit the portal. And teams don't need permission from the NCAA to start contacting players. So there's millions of dollars being thrown around with no real time frame about and taking other teams' players out of nowhere, out of the blue. A little bit after I recorded this a little bit before I recorded this video, the big report was that Jeremiah Smith, part of Ohio State, national championship winning team. I don't know if he's officially in the portal yet, but it was reported that he was offered $4.5 million to enter the transfer portal. Yeah, I'm sure that totally happened overnight, guys. That happened the minute he talked to somebody. There totally wasn't anything going on weeks or months before that happened, because they were seeing him play in the playoffs, right? Yeah, about that. So now we have basically NIL-flation. Mystery money and tampering has now flown the numbers through the ceiling to the point we're about to reach $10 million. We're reaching NFL levels of money, but the problem is, it's not a fair share of the wealth. The rich get richer. Huh. Now, where did I hear that about a decade ago when we first started this whole journey? Oh yeah, the teams in the old 4-team playoff just kept collecting crap, and the smaller guys got left with nothing. We're right back where we were, except this time, instead of playoff seeding, it's money, which would eventually lead to playoff seeding. It's like we went full circle. We've just added extra steps. The circle has some kinks in it now, but it's the same frickin' circle. So what do we do about it? Well, currently at the moment, starting in April, there is a proposed NIL sharing program that the NCAA is introducing. Also, there's apparently a cap of $23 million, which solves the issue of the rich getting richer, because the revenue sharing would get split amongst all the teams, and then all the NIL money would be split amongst all the sports and all the players. So the NIL-flation would come down, players wouldn't be getting paid into the stratosphere. The problem is, tampering is not being fixed, and mystery donors are not being fixed. The McDonald's bags are still McDonald's bagging. And I don't know if there's a real fix to it. I feel like NIL is just one big Pandora's box, and it just, once it's opened, you can't close it. I mean, they've done a good job if this revenue sharing model comes in to limit its chaos, but how are you going to stop donors from giving mystery money to teams? Unless you reintroduce the permission to contact rule, which, as I've said, it feels like the NCAA is a little powerless. It's not going to stop teams and players from communicating weeks to months before the season's over. Man, that's really messed up. So I'm hoping this revenue sharing model is a band-aid on a bullet hole, because I have nothing else to say about it. Now let's talk about some really sucky stuff.
ABC Sports proudly presents exclusive coverage of the National Championship game. It's the grand finale of the Bowl Championship Series.
So the first few years of the college football playoff actually had some parity. Sure, the games were blowouts, but Florida State, Oregon, and Michigan State all got bids in the first 2 seasons. Part of this was because we had just left the BCS era, And I just said in the intro that the BCS era sucked. But something about the BCS era that we don't have in the playoff era until this season is because it wasn't just 4 spots. Yes, the national championship only had 2 spots, but notice that BCS stands for Bowl Championship Series. So you didn't have to be in the national championship to feel like you accomplished something. Before the playoff era, every single team had, even if a team like Alabama had national championship aspirations, everyone wanted to do 2 things. Everyone, all 100 and something teams in FBS. Beat your rivals. Well, 3 things. Beat your rivals, win your home games, and get 6 wins. Because if you got 6 wins, you were going bowling. And as Pat McAfee so eloquently put it last year, when we first started talking about the integrity of bowls, teams at the time in the BCS era were just as honored and excited to play in the Orange Bowl as they were excited to play in the Julio's Thongs for Men Bowl.
Let's see what we got, guys. What are we looking at? Julio's Thongs for Men?
Yeah.
Come on, what kind of dude wears a thong?
Yeah, that's messed up. Perverts, you know?
But now we live in the 14 playoff era, or now, modern day as you're watching this video, the 12-team playoff era. So now, you only want to be one of those 4 teams. It's a lot like the NFL. The NFL doesn't have 57 bowl games. Everybody in the NFL has one goal: win the Super Bowl. Win the Super Bowl. So now college football is starting to become a lot of the same. Your goal is to be one of the 4 teams, or now one of the 12 teams, to make the playoffs to play for a national championship. Bowls don't matter anymore. Bottom line, bowls don't matter anymore. Playoffs are reason 1. Reason 2 is because when the BCS was started, or let's take it back further than that, before the BCS, when you had the Bowl Coalition and the Bowl Alliance, really, you probably had to win 7 or 8 games to make a bowl, because there weren't that many bowl games. You obviously had your New Year's bowl games: Peach, Rose, Orange, Fiesta, Sugar, Cotton. And then after that, you really had limited options about what bowls you can make. You know, you had the Gator Bowl and the Outback Bowl and the Sun Bowl and the Citrus Bowl and maybe a few others that predate the BCS, but that's really it. Bowls were few and far between, so making a bowl was prestigious, because even though there weren't just the New Year's Bowls games, there were very few bowl games. And then the BCS happened. During the BCS, bowl games shot through the roof. This is where you get the Meineke Car Care Bowl, the Tax Slayer Bowl, the Julio's Thongs for Men Bowl.
Julio's Thongs for Men?
Yeah.
Come on, what kind of dude wears a thong?
Bass Pro Shops Bowl. Name a bowl. Name a corporate American consumer brand and put the name bowl at the end of it, and you have a new football game. So when we get to the playoff era, not only do bowls not matter because of the playoffs, but now you have this crazy oversaturation of bowl games. There's like 40 bowl games. I think there was a situation, and there was a situation in 2017 where Mississippi State finished 5-7, and they still made a bowl game. A team with a losing record made a bowl game because there are so many bowls. You can't just put people who are 6-6 in them. And now, because there's no more importance to bowl games, now what you have is players will opt out. Opting out kind of started with the playoff era, but it really started in 2021 because Ole Miss's quarterback Matt Corral tore his ACL in the Sugar Bowl because he wanted to go play for his team. This immediately dropped Matt Corral from like late first round to second round draft pick prospect down to day 3 of the draft. And this scared every single college player to realize, okay, well, my future is more important than a silly little bowl game that doesn't even matter because it's not a playoff game. I'm not playing for a national championship. So unless it's a playoff bowl now, players sit out of bowl games, which is not a problem we used to have. And, I mean, you can't just force a player to play a bowl game, especially in the era of NIL. It's kind of like the NFL now. Are you starting to see a trend here? players are their own individuals now. It's part of why really Nick Saban retired, if you think about it. Because, you know, it's in the NFL, you can't force a player to really do anything. If you don't command that player's respect, they're definitely not going to be persuaded enough to do something for their coach, like see Mike Tomlin. So this thing of sitting out bowl games is going to continue for a really long time unless we do something about it. And nobody's talked about fixes other than forcing players to play bowl games, which is just stupid. Why is this the suggestion we're going with? I just said because I have 7 subscribers. That's why. Anyway, here's my fix. We cut like half the bowl games out. We have like 40. Let's cut it down to 20. Of course, keep the ones that are in the playoffs. Keep the New Year's Six in the playoffs. But cut it back down to 20. Increase the threshold to make a bowl game to 7 wins. Get the 500 fence riders out of here. Get the 6-6ers out of here. You have to have a winning record to go to the playoffs. You have to be 7-5 or better. Well, not the playoffs, but a bowl game. You know what I'm saying. And because, I mean, we're already past the point of no return with NIL, just make bowl games money games. You win a bowl game, you get like $1 million for your NIL collective. You get $2 million for your NIL collective. That's worth a star wide receiver. Players will play for that. If you pay players to play in the bowl games, give them contract incentives like NFL players have. If you play your bowl game, you get $200,000. That's not forcing them. But hey, dangle another carrot in their face. Let them go make more money. That's my pick to fix bowl games, because right now we've kind of ruined the college football postseason other than playoffs, and we only get so many playoff games. And what was so special about the college postseason was, where in the NFL postseason you have very few and far between games, bowl mania is a big deal in college football. But right now it's too much of a big deal. You can't even watch all the bowl games. You have to miss 2 bowl games to watch one. Like, that's the point we're at right now. And if you cut it down to the bowl games that actually matter, your Sun Bowls, your Citrus Bowls, your Gator Bowls, your Outback Bowls, the Pop-Tart Bowl. God, I love the Pop-Tart Bowl. Everyone loves the Pop-Tart Bowl. It's the Pop-Tart Bowl. Keep those bowl games that actually mean something in the lineup. And that's how you fix bowl games. They immediately become relevant again to people who watch the game. This is something we can't fix, though. I saved the most dastardly and corrupt and god-awful thing for the last. Enjoy.
Look at that. Look, and they're driving right by. They don't even know what they're missing.
Well, it didn't used to be that way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. 40 years ago, that interstate down there didn't exist.
Really?
Yeah. Back then, cars came across the country a whole different way.
How do you mean?
College football conference realignment is the one thing where my tone will change in this video, because I feel very passionate about this topic more than the others, and I think this topic is the most detrimental to the sport, because there's part of blissful ignorance in all the other issues: the NIL, the transfer portal, the bowl games, and they're all things that can be fixed despite the NCAA not having any power anymore. This is just messed up and cruel and fair, not just to athletes but to players. And there is no innocent ulterior motive to it other than rich a-holes who run these conferences just want more and more money. Conference realignment wasn't that much of a thing back in the day. It really started around the 80s, 90s, something like that. And it was very small bursts, you know. Some of the more prominent examples of conference realignment have been, like, I think in 1994 or something like that, South Carolina and Arkansas joined the SEC because the Southwestern Conference splintered and shut down for the Big 12 to be formed out of the Big 8 in the Southwestern Conference. Miami and Virginia Tech left to go to the ACC, but the Big East stayed intact. 2013, once again, going back a decade, is where this really got messed up. In 2010, Texas, yes, Texas, this team I despise with every ounce of my being, for this exact reason, decided to go above and beyond its own conference, the Big 12 Conference, to negotiate its own TV deal in which it got its own TV network. This was around the time other conferences were creating their own TV networks. Pac-12 had created the Pac-12 network. The Big Ten had created the Big Ten network with Fox Sports. We were about a year away from the SEC creating the SEC network with ESPN. Instead of trying to advocate for a Big 12 network for the Big 12, Texas went off and got their own network and got a lot of money for it. Texas creating the Longhorn Network is what got this ball rolling, because this is what prompted Colorado to leave for the Pac-12, and Missouri and Texas A&M would leave for the SEC. Now here we are in 2025, and that ball has fell off a cliff and is now plummeting. Even through a lot of those early realignments, the main goal of the conferences remain the same, which is to keep historic rivalries together and to create regionality, which made travel and going on road games for college athletes easier. Because, shocker, this isn't the NFL G League yet. And then, in like 2021, the news broke. Texas and Oklahoma were going to join the Southeastern Conference. Here we go. This is then superseded by first the USC announcing and UCLA announcing they were going to the Big Ten. The Pac-12 is slowly losing members. The next thing is Washington and Oregon are also joining the Big Ten. So the Pac-12 is now like the Pac-7 or 8. Only then, for a bunch of other Pac teams, Pacific 12 is what that stood for, to leave for the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. The Atlantic Coast Conference. Then Colorado and Utah decided to go home to the Big 12, and that was that for the Pac-12. It is now the Pac-2 because Wazoo, Washington State, and Oregon State got left in the dust by its superiors. Remember what I said about 10 years ago about the college football playoff making the richer teams richer and leaving the little guys with nothing? Wow! More kinks in the circle. Same circle.
Mrs. Puff empty-handed. We ain't talking about this or this. We're talking about this.
Almost ready.
Hurry, boy, get the flowers.
College football had a astronomical rise in terms of TV viewership through the late 90s and early 2000s, which is part of why conference realignment is now happening. Greg Sankey, Big Ten commissioner, don't know his name. Big 12 commissioner, don't know his name, don't care. These guys want more TV revenue to go to their conference. Not because their conference is going to reap the benefits, but because they just pocket the money. This is why there is no Pac-12. Because the Pac-12 commissioner was incompetent and signed a terrible TV deal. First of all, the TV deal they were on for the last few years of their conference really didn't feature a lot of true late afternoon and primetime slots. It had no 1 o'clock slots, of course, because this is the Pacific Coast. It's like 10 a.m. over there. But they didn't have any 4 o'clock Eastern kickoffs. They hardly had any 7:30, 8 o'clock Eastern kickoffs, which, if you're a diehard college football fan like me, we loved Pac-12 After Dark. Pac-12 After Dark was awesome, and they were always great games for absolutely zero reason. But it's not helpful for a conference because it's not getting exposure like the big bad SEC gets exposure. And this is what slowly kills the Pac-12, because all these teams leave for the bigger conferences because they want bigger TV revenue. Once again, in that intro, I flashed how much the new TV deals are worth. The Big Ten's TV deal, where a lot of the powerhouses of the Pac-12 went, USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington. Whew. That TV deal is worth $7 billion, almost $8 billion. The SEC's is worth $3 billion, not to be outdone, because even though the SEC took less contract money, the SEC on ABC is now going to put more eyeballs on the Southeastern Conference than there has ever been. And the Southeastern Conference was already probably the most watched conference in college football to begin with. And this is why the conference realignment thing is so dark and messed up in comparison to the rest of the issues here. Because there is no good ending to this. Because of TV revenue and teams not wanting to get left behind and miss the boat of TV revenue, even though they don't really see any of that TV revenue, it's all NIL money. McDonald's bags. They're going to jump to the bigger conferences. The end goal of this is a Super League. Is the SEC and Big Ten and about the best 40 teams in the nation being in this conference. It's already being talked about. I roll the clip. Credit to this creator. I'll have his channel linked in the description.
It's great for the top teams, but it's going to minimize the impact for some of the other teams. Maybe 100 other teams in college football are not going to have the same opportunity that the top 30 have. And those top 30 may end up someplace in and of themselves playing each other. You know, I think if we have that, it would be certainly easier to find out who the best teams were, because you wouldn't have so many games that were so imbalanced in terms of who should win and who should lose.
All right, that's it. We've made a date. The 6 of us, Kirk's Place, sometime in the summer. We're going to set the whole schedule. We'll have a big TV show for a schedule reveal, and off we go from there. You feel good about that? That's how we'll do it.
Love it. I'm in. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
How about that? They want a Super League. ESPN wants a Super League. Why? More TV money. But the thing is, the Super League sucks because, first of all, smaller schools get left behind. And this whole conference realignment thing, forgetting region, we got California teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Yeah, a football player who's treated like a rock star may be able to travel cross country on a Friday evening to go play football on a Saturday. What about some girl who's in the gymnastics team who has a test on Tuesday and then Wednesday has to fly across the country for a gymnastics tournament? They don't get the TV revenue like college football does. She doesn't get the NIL money like football players do. How is that fair to her? It's not. It's not fair. And there is no fix to this. The only fix is if the NCAA got some power back. The only way they're going to get power back is getting a commissioner. But all the teams all the leagues already have their own commissioner. All the conferences already have their own commissioner. So they would have to all agree to relinquish their power to a commissioner, which I'm sure smaller conferences like the Group of Five or the Big 12 or the ACC would gladly let someone like a Nick Saban or a Josh Pate for college football commissioner, please. I'm sure they would be fine with relinquishing that power to a commissioner. Greg Sankey's not going to give up his power to a commissioner. The Big Ten commissioner is not going to give up his power to an NCAA commissioner. So we are just on a death spiral with conference realignment. And I don't know if there's a way out.
A new direction of the Oakland A's. We are card counters at the blackjack table. We're going to turn the odds on the casino.
I don't see it. Seriously, guys, I think we have to remember, this is the man. He answers to no one except ownership and God. And he doesn't have to answer to us.
Truth is, there's a lot of positive things about college football happening right now. Like I said, I think we finally have the best playoff format we've had ever in the top division of college football. It needs some minor tweaks, sure, but the 12-team system has brought some parity back into the sport. It's made more teams competitive. It's brought back the upset culture we all loved. Why 2007 is such a nostalgic season. Parity, players getting paid. We have the football video games back. It's a lot of things to celebrate. We had the most 2007-esque season this year that we've had since 2007. There were upsets happening left and right. But there are some very serious issues that either can't be fixed at all, and we're just going to have to hope that the bleeding stops. But then there's a lot of these issues that I feel like we have a good future with. And this is my state of the league. It always gets darkest before the dawn. Even if you are not ready for the day, it cannot always be night. College football has a very bright future ahead. But I have concerns. If all of a sudden all these solutions for the portal and the bowls and NIL get bailed out on and we don't fall through with them, how bad is it going to get? Especially because I think the most dastardly and most problematic issue can't be fixed. We can't fix conference realignment. We can't. But for now, we have a sport. And we have a great sport. And a sport that can be better than it's ever been if we grow a pair and real leadership gets in charge. College football can be better than it's ever been. This is where I tease a future video that's like probably a year or two down the line. Heed the warnings of NASCAR in the 2000s. Don't chase money in the future and leave your history and heritage and culture behind. Because you may not lose all of your viewers and TV revenue all at once. But neither did NASCAR. But look at them today. It's a shell of itself. NCAA, heed the warning. This has been State of the League. And that's State of the League, guys. Not all State of the Leagues are going to be that depressing. I just have a lot of concern for college football right now. And honestly, I have a deeper love for college ball than I do the NFL. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed what you just watched, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. Follow my socials in my bio. As soon as I get the ability to put links in my description, I will. But go to the profile for this page and go follow my socials. The day you're seeing this, NFL Championship weekend is either currently going on or it's already over. There are already TikToks reacting to the AFC Championship and NFC Championship. And I will have a review of all those games up on my YouTube channel later this week. This week, NASCAR starts back, so there will be NASCAR games to talk about. Or NASCAR races. Yeah, see, I'm doing this post-production, guys. So if you like NASCAR, stick around. We'll have some content involving that. All right, I'm getting out of your hair. Enjoy your weekend.